Iowa that works with uh, those, that have business succession needs, as well as strategic marketing services. And many of you may be familiar with strategic marketing. They do a variety of research for businesses and nonprofit organizations, from small rural communities all the way up to Fortune 500 companies. And so we've been marshaling our resources to focus on several issues. Our last EDA award was to focus on entrepreneurship and working on a regional entrepreneurship initiatives in about 6 different areas of the state. Our current initiative is to focus on business retention, expansion efforts, and bringing entrepreneurship and innovation into those efforts. So helping companies take a look at new products, new initiatives, improvements to their process. How do we take companies that may have plateaued during the last few years as far as R&D and go back and instill a little bit of innovation with them? So what Carla and I have been spending a lot of our time doing is focusing on the visits that our economic developers and Chamber of Commerce and even our Main Street organizations are doing out in all communities, but especially in our rural communities in Iowa. The questions that they ask and kind of the approach, and how can they bring in questions related to innovation. And one of the sort of side things that we have been getting into is just the need for us as economic developers in all areas of the state, especially in rural Iowa, to learn more about Industry 4.0 and Manufacturing 4.0, which is kind of a buzzword that you may have heard of. Some of you may be very familiar with it. Some of you may be new to it. But it's issues and challenges that are going to be facing our companies, all industries, but especially our manufacturers in Iowa. And we have recently, the UNI Regional, or the University Center, has joined a consortium of organizations here in the state, everybody from Iowa State Cirrus, the Department of Ed, Iowa Area Economic Development Authority, the community colleges, and others, professional developers of Iowa, to come together to put together a plan to really elevate this issue and say, hey, this is a time of urgency around it. So when Mark and Bill reached out to Carla and I and said, hey, we'd love to have you come on and visit about the center, it seemed like a good fit to have another friend join us, a guest on this discussion, which is Jill Lippincott from Iowa Area Economic Development, the Iowa Economic Development Authority, to visit. And Jill, welcome this morning. We really appreciate your time.
Great, thank you for having me. And I'm looking forward to talking with all of you and being in partnership with all the great work that you're doing to share and educate about, you're right, the buzzword of Industry and Manufacturing 4.0.
Yeah, well, this just get us up to speed a little bit, and especially from that rural perspective, because the folks on this morning are really looking at it from a rural perspective. What do they need to know?
Sure. Well, I'll cover a lot of ground in a short amount of time. We at IDA, as many of you know, put together a Manufacturing 4.0 report that was released earlier this year. We spent the last year, bulk of 2020, when we weren't addressing COVID, working with manufacturers, state leaders, individuals involved in manufacturers, from the supply chain to those that had any sort of connection to manufacturing, to put together the report. And so it was very much an industry-led report to address what we had started to hear about back in 2018 from the Year of Manufacturing, this buzzword, Industry 4.0. And really, to be more specific, since manufacturing is nearly 20% of Iowa's GDP, Manufacturing 4.0. Industry 4.0 technologies are technologies that we all know when it comes to cloud computing, data analysis, robotics, artificial intelligence. But those are specific to manufacturing when we talk manufacturing 4.0. And that's really where the sector, that an industry sector that we honed in on with this report. That report showed us that 53% of our manufacturers in Iowa are in rural counties. So it very much is a rural issue that we are taking a look at, because this report was also very much geared at our small to medium-sized manufacturers and recommendations to help those manufacturers gear up and add more gear, add more technology under the Industry 4.0 umbrella to their manufacturing facilities. Because we know that that's a part of this fourth industrial revolution. That's why it's called Industry 4.0. The technologies that are out there are the types of technologies that our large manufacturers are already using. And we just held a discussion yesterday with our large manufacturers, and they are talking to us about how they're needing our small to medium-sized manufacturers to also utilize those technologies and come alongside them in order to stay a part of the supply chain. So it's very important that we focus on supporting our rural and small to medium-sized manufacturers in starting that journey of investing and transitioning to those Industry 4.0 technologies so that they can continue to supply to our larger manufacturers. But a part of that is knowing what's out there, how to do it, what's all involved in that. It's not just the investment in the technology, it's integration of the system, it's workforce, and that was all part of the report. So that report's available on the site. And if you haven't seen it, happy to share the link to that in the chat. But I want to talk today specifically about few incentive programs that were passed this legislative session.
Oh, thank you.
That we're hoping that everyone on this call can be an ambassador to the community and share information about. It's so new that when James was asking me to come talk about it and provide him with talking points to talk about it, I said, I don't even have a fact sheet yet because it literally just got passed and we're still writing our fact sheet. So if you don't mind, I'm happy to just kind of talk off the cuff about it.
Exactly. Perfect. So
I'm going to share my screen. I'll pause there for any questions though first, if anything I'm missing, James.
No, this is great. This is great. I think that legislation would be a good place to start because there's been a lot of talk, but let's sort of visit about what's going to be going on.
All right. So let me know when you are seeing my screen and hopefully the right screen, because that's always the trick too, right?
There you go.
Okay. All right. So this last legislative session, we did have a couple of bills passed. One, I'm going to actually skip to the bottom, advanced or bonus accelerated depreciation. This actually is not just for manufacturers, it's for all companies in Iowa, something that we didn't have. And couples Iowa Section 168K, federal bonus depreciation, and ensures we remain uncoupled with 163J, which essentially preserves expensing changes put into Iowa code. If you are a CPA or you know financial accounting, this is your language. If you don't, make sure, and we'll have talking points on this that are explained in much more plain language, I assure you. But this is something we'll want you to be talking with manufacturers about. We'll also be putting out a letter to manufacturers talking about this just to make sure they're aware of it, because it's really going to come into effect obviously during next year's tax season. But this is something that allows them to depreciate their assets at a faster rate, thus allowing them to make investments at a sooner rate. Because one of the things with these technologies, or with any technology really, I mean, if we look at our phones and how quickly we replace them when they become outdated, what we have now in terms of Industry 4.0 technology may be outdated. I know that's a fear for many of our manufacturers. If they invest in something now, who's to say we're not going to have something new 5 years from now? So that's been honestly, I think, a fear for many, even getting started in their Industry 4.0 journey. But the other one is the one I want to spend the most time on today. It was the grant program that was established for small to medium-sized manufacturers. These are manufacturers by code defined as less than 75 employees. And this is going to allow them to bring technology investments into their facility. So a little bit more detail, I'm gonna skip ahead here. So this grant program, like I said, 75 FTEs across all locations is how manufacturers will be eligible. Grants are up to $75,000 total, but there's actually 2 levels of grants that will be built into this. $25,000 grant for technology investments, and it's IIoT, which stands for Industrial Internet of Things. That's really the software, your cybersecurity software, predictive maintenance software, data analytics, augmented reality, potentially sensor-driven transmission equipment. That's the software that might help you run the actual capital expense and equipment that you might also be investing in. So the $50,000 grant is really for more capital expenditures that manufacturers might make. That's that machinery acquisition, advanced or autonomous robotics, equipment for process improvements. Manufacturers will be able to apply for both. So we modeled this off of a grant program. There's actually 2 other states that do similar programs, and Iowa literally is one of 3 states that is doing this. We're very much in advance of where others are. But one of the things that we learned from other states was make sure that manufacturers understand that it isn't just the capital expense, it's also about integrating that into their system. So that's why we kind of broke those out. And also Industry 4.0 isn't just capital expenditures, it is sometimes just software. So manufacturers can apply up to $75,000 right now. That's a lifetime cap. Could be raised at a later point. We know that that's a small drop in the bucket for a lot of these expenditures and investments that they're looking to make, but it's a start. I just talked to a company this week who's looking to make an investment in a new piece of equipment to replace almost 100-year-old equipment, but it would automate a process that's very labor intensive. And it's a $350,000 expense, but this, again, helps to de-risk some of that investment for them. These are one-to-one matches, so we do require a cash match from the company. But the biggest thing, and this is what we are trying to make sure and want to pass on to you today to share with manufacturers in your rural areas, that we are requiring a serious Industry 4.0 assessment in advance of the submission of the grant application. This is an assessment that Cirrus does. They've been piloting it. It's a really great way for manufacturers to get a third-party understanding of what is happening in their operation, in their production facility, and where their biggest opportunity is for investment and taking that start in their Industry 4.0 journey, or next step perhaps. So Cirrus is going to come in. They have various levels of assessments. There's a very easy web assessment you can do. It takes like an hour. I think this is like a 2-hour type of assessment. They also have a 3rd tier assessment where they spend time with you for a few days. This is the 2nd tier. This is really just, they get to know you a little bit. They'll provide an overview of what they understand, and to be or they get to know the manufacturer and provide an overview of what they understand to be the greatest opportunity for investment, might provide a few examples. We're going to use that assessment to pair it up with the application that comes through, and just make sure we have a third party that kind of says, if the manufacturer is applying for a grant and wants to invest in this type of automation, that's related to where Cirrus also sees, an opportunity for them. So we're not seeing an application come through for a forklift truck. And that's not really in line with Industry 4.0. So that's what kind of helps us make sure that those application is in line with the idea that these are really meant to be in line with the Industry 4.0 types of technologies. We're getting that word out now, because although the grant applications aren't expected to be open until September, manufacturers can begin working with Cirrus now to do those assessments. And we encourage that so that the applicants are ready in September to, fill out the application, submit it along with their assessment that's already been completed. We do ask that the manufacturer not make an investment until they've submitted their application, as these are reimbursement grants. But we do hope that the first awards would be made in November. It's a 60-day turnaround once awards are or applications are submitted, and they'll be accepted on a rolling basis until funds are depleted. So we're very excited about this. I speak with manufacturers almost once a day at this point, who are are telling us, we know we need to make a change. We need to invest in automation. Here's what we're thinking. We don't know where to start. Is there anything that can help support us? That's what this grant program was really built off of. We modeled it after, like I said, a few other states who have given us some really great best practices. We hope it could grow even beyond this. And we're looking at a few other programs as well, utilizing some of the federal dollars. So more details on that to come when we have more on that. But beyond that, I want to just go back to my last slide. So like I said, doing a lot of the site promotion for Manufacturing 4.0, you'll see that come out more in July. The Industry 4.0 Consortium, as James talked about, is happening now. You'll see more of that come forward as well. James is doing a great job with coordinating a lot of the media collateral and videos, planning for that. The grant program promotion, you'll see more of that come out from us. That will launch in September. We have an OEM advisory group that is meeting that is also helping us. We have an advanced manufacturing work group that is meeting. We have an Iowa Innovation Council that is meeting. All of that's not even listed on here. Manufacturing Day in October, we're also looking to do some big things. So we're already starting to think about that. And in November, our first round of grants hopefully awarded. So that's a very quick overview of lots of things that we're working on together with a lot of our partners, and just happy to engage all of you in that as ambassadors to this work, and more to come, more details, more fact sheets, more marketing, a website, etc. will be forthcoming.
So Jill, I have a quick question for you. As I think about what rural developers can do to help with this program, besides just offering the information to their local manufacturers, but that I'm thinking about like that match that the business has to put in. Does that have to, could that be a loan? Like if there was a revolving loan fund, could part of it come from a loan, or could there be community grants or something that would, maybe just supplement their match a little bit? But I'm just wondering, will that be allowed?
I think at this point, we're looking at it to be a cash match from the company. But we certainly support any other types of programming that communities want to create to supplement. Like I said, for example, that company is looking at a $350,000 investment. They're going to have a cash match to our grant, but there's another part of that investment that is not covered by our grant program.
Jill, I know that you need to hop to another meeting, but it does feel I love the word that you used, ambassador, to the folks that are on the call, the Zoominar today, being ambassadors. There does feel like right now there is a sense of urgency, and a united sense of urgency. Could you speak to that a little bit? I know Debbie's a big champion of that, but what are you feeling as far as everybody kind of we're all sort of flying in a V on this one?
Yeah. I absolutely feel that. Our manufacturers feel that. And I think the sense of urgency is coming from what their understanding is. What they say is, we know we need to make these changes, we just don't know how. But our choice is either we make the change and grow, or we don't and we scale down. And we know what scale down means, and we know what that means in a small community, right? So that's the sense of urgency, is we don't want to see, we want to scale up. So one of the phrases, we literally, it's been in a report that we've used, I've heard Director Durham say it, manufacturers who don't transition into Industry 4.0 will be left behind. It's as plain as that. Because again, like I said, we talked with our OEMs just yesterday, and they are telling us they're at this point creating intermediary solutions to work with suppliers who aren't transitioning. They can only do that for so long. And at some point, they'll just move on to a supplier who is able to communicate with their systems and utilize the same data systems in Industry 4.0. So this is happening, and we want to make sure that our Iowa suppliers are still at the table and still part of that supply chain when those OEMs are making those decisions.
Excellent. We have time for about one question for Jill from anybody who's got one.
Well, just a comment. Jill's done a great job of leading this entire Manufacturing 4.0 grant. This is exciting. And if you have companies that want to do training, 4.0 would also qualify for 260F training. And we did receive some additional funding this year for additional F projects. So any companies that want to start training in advance or whatever, or when they get some equipment to keep 260F in mind.
Great point, Rob. Thank you. Jill, I know you need to roll to the next meeting. Thank you so much for your time this morning. We really appreciate it. And can we get you to come back and visit with Mark and Bill to provide an update later on?
Absolutely. More to come. So I apologize for putting a teaser out there, but yes, much more to come later this summer with all of our materials come out, application comes out. We'll be doing more press, and just a big kudos to you and Carla and Rob as well, part of all the work with the consortium. We're just loving that everybody is circling the wagons around all of this effort. And as you said, flying in a V. I think this is great to be all on the same page of how we are messaging this to our manufacturers, and also offering resources. I mean, that's my biggest thing is messaging it, but also saying, but we can help. So how can we come alongside of them and provide support?
All right. Well, hey, thanks a lot, Jill.
Thank you.
Everybody, I'm just going to show, this is something that I know it's today, it's in a couple of hours, 11:30 to 12. If you can attend it, or even better, if you can send this out to your manufacturers. If you see Mike O'Donnell and his team, you need to buy them a cup of coffee, because they're out there doing these assessments kind of as fast as they can and trying to get that information. But today at 11:30, they've got a quick overview of Industry 4.0 and what Cirrus provides. And I'm sure they're going to be talking about this assessment. So this would be a good one to be kind of a part of an arrow in your BRE business retention expansion efforts, just to get this out to your manufacturers. Carla, I want to switch gears a little bit, not a lot, because I want to talk a little bit about what we have been doing here at UNI's University Center regarding Industry 4.0 and some workshops that that you and I have been heavily involved with. And I was just wondering if you could walk us through these workshops. They've been kind of evolving, but if you could give us an overview, that'd be great.
Sure. As part of that EDA project that James talked about at the very beginning, we were doing business visits, with businesses that we considered to be, really advanced. And they were speaking a language that some of us were having some troubles keeping up with. And we realized that a lot of their innovation, what they saw as innovation in their companies and industries, was the implementation of these Industry 4.0 technologies. So after doing a lot of digging, a lot of research, a lot of learning ourselves, we decided this is something that an economic developer should be able to wrap their heads around, so that when they're out there talking to those businesses, they understand the language and the basics of Industry 4.0. Your manufacturers don't really call it Industry 4.0. They're talking about all of these different technologies and equipment, pieces of equipment that are that they're learning about in their industry. And so how do we keep up with that? How do we understand what it is they're talking about, and also recognize when there's something that we see that they could be utilizing or looking into, and connecting them with the right resources based on that. So our workshop, and like James said, we are continuing to refine it as we go along and get feedback from participants. But it's really a basic workshop about learning that language, understanding what those technologies might look like in practice, and why they're important to industries. And we go beyond just manufacturing in that workshop, because Industry 4.0 isn't just manufacturing 4.0. Iowa is focused on that because, as Jill said, it's a big part of our domestic product. But there are a lot of main streets and chambers that are working day to day with retailers, tourism industry. So those people need to be thinking about how Industry 4.0 is impacting their their jobs as well. So it's just about being able to talk the talk and recognize technologies and understand where businesses can possibly look into adding some technology to their current processes. And so, you know, we talk about gauging the readiness. Are there some questions you can ask to supplement your existing BR&E questions that you're already asking? And then James talks a lot about going from an interviewer to kind of an investigator to really understand what it is that your businesses could really take advantage of and then stay competitive in the market.
Carla, can you visit about, we're trying to, through the consortium, we're trying to offer a variety of links of these and to kind of tailor it to the needs of the area, and should they contact us if they're interested?
Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question, but yes, we have been doing these as people have reached out to us through the consortium, which we'll talk about here in a minute. We are kind of on that beginning education phase of that whole consortium process. And so just really getting out there with that rudimentary explanations about what Industry 4.0 is, how do you talk the talk, and then what does it look like? We also spend a lot of time talking about the resources that are available. Of course, Cirrus is a huge resource for our manufacturing industries, but there are also private entities out there that are extremely helpful as well.
It's nice with those. We've been trying to get local businesses engaged as panelists. For example, we were down in Ottumwa with the developers from kind of the Opportunity Squared and a little bit outside of that last week, and had a gentleman from the cybersecurity division of Cambridge Financial over there in Fairfield come in and visit, and it was really very eye-opening to everyone in the room as far as that goes. But we've had manufacturers to share about how they've entered in the process and evolved to even down to very small folks, and we've tried to incorporate what we're kind of calling the mom and pop 4.0. So it's not just manufacturing that we touch on in these workshops. We're also talking about how retail is evolving, how service-based businesses are evolving. So we've had the combination of traditional economic developers and chamber folks in there, but we've had Main Street directors as well, and others that are focused on maybe outside of your industrial sector. So thanks, Carla, for that. I mentioned the Cirrus session already. The effort that the workshops that Carla was providing us an overview about is part of our second thing that we wanted to talk about, which is that overall effort to improve the BRE visits and adding in that entrepreneurship and innovation. The Center for Business Growth and Innovation here at UNI has been working with the University of Iowa and the folks at the John Papa John Entrepreneurial Center at the University of Iowa, and they're really taking a look at strategies and approaches to help existing companies look at entrepreneurship and innovation so that as our developers are out there, they have a place. Cirrus is going to be working with them, but can we also have resources that might lead them through taking a look at what could we do, doing some visioning and trying to create a more innovative companies out there. So we've got that piece. And then, as Carla mentioned, we are trying to improve the visit, the overall visit that our economic developers, and especially in our rural communities, have. And we'll talk about COVID in a little bit, in a few minutes, but one of the things that we found in talking with economic developers across the state is, they had connected over the years with their larger manufacturers, their larger businesses, but there's an awful lot of the smaller tier businesses and even Main Street businesses that they haven't been able to get out to. And so how can we get them to be looking at those businesses from more of an investigative approach? So certainly having questions that we need to be asking when we're out talking to these businesses, but each rural business that you would go out and visit, be thinking like an investigator. What issues might be this company facing down the road? What other companies have you worked with that may be similar that you can bring information and insight? Or how might you connect this business to some other service provider? And so it's just kind of a mindset that we're working on, trying to elevate amongst our economic developers. And then the second piece of that is kind of what I was talking about with the Center for Business Growth and Innovation, the resources that are out there. You can only imagine Cirrus is out there talking to all these businesses. Center for Business Growth is out there talking to all these businesses. There's going to be, they can't do it all. There's a lot of other assistance that needs to be provided. So especially here at UNI, our departments of physics or Department of Technology, are our faculty and students positioned to help those businesses. And so we're working with them and connecting them with businesses to really create a strong network of support. One of the things that Carla and I have found is that in Iowa, we have been focusing on, as Joe pointed, manufacturing 4.0. Manufacturing, there's a lot of resources out there to assist our manufacturers. But when you start to look outside of that lane, there's not a lot as clear resources so folks can pick up the phone. There's certainly private sectors, service providers, and they're phenomenal and fantastic. But just looking to say, is the roadmap clear for businesses, and are there places that they can turn to get their questions?
And I would just add that, obviously we have the SBDCs everywhere, and they work with the small size businesses that are non-manufacturing. But when it comes to like specific issues or specific areas of interest, especially in that Industry 4.0 technologies, then there isn't that specialist like there is a Cirrus for the manufacturing entities.
Exactly. Mark, I'm gonna just see if, do you have anything that you want to add from Cirrus or Iowa State's perspective before we transition kind of onto the COVID side of things related to Industry 4.0 or BRE and innovation?
I'd just like to stress what Jill had stressed. We are already getting businesses, manufacturers calling us up, wanting to get in the queue to have an assessment done. So this programming is very successful, and please encourage your local manufacturers to take advantage of this, because I truly believe if you are not part of the digital economy in manufacturing in the next 5 years, it's going to be hard to exist and be competitive.
Absolutely. And we're happy to answer any questions as we're going through. Just feel free to jump in and blurt out any questions that you might have. Okay, so we've been working on the BREI and starting to gear up on the Industry 4.0. And then, as you know, COVID hit last year, and here at IDM and within BCS, we kind of just put the brakes on and said, okay, there's some more urgent needs that we really need to take a look at. We'll get back to our university center, and to their credit, we picked up the phone and reached out to our federal colleagues there in Denver, and they said, absolutely, do what you need to do. And so the director of the Institute for Decision Making, Drew Conrad here, was close contact with Debbie and the folks down at the Economic Development Authority, and talking about, okay, what do we need? What do we need to do? And it was a business impact survey. Let's find out how these businesses are being impacted by this pandemic that was evolving day to day last spring. And so what we did is pivoted on some of our time and effort and resources that were devoted to doing these other things to focus on getting Iowa policymakers and business leaders the information that they needed to make some decisions. So we have done 3 surveys over the last year, and you can see here on the slide that we've been very fortunate. And sorry, I've got a typo there. Survey 3 has, which is our most recent one, had about 6,500. To all of your credit, you are the ones that were out there championing this with your businesses to get them to respond. And to be honest with you, you visit with Drew as far as his expectation on response rate, and this kind of killed it, you know, as far as what you were all able to do and accomplish by getting your businesses to respond. In many cases, they sort of suffered from survey fatigue. We realize that, but at the end of the day, many folks in Des Moines were using this information as they were developing policy. And I want to take just a few minutes to visit a little bit about, from the rural perspective, we have been able to get in there and look at our 88 rural counties, and I've got a rural report that we're going to be releasing just shortly on survey number 3, but we've been doing rural breakouts for the other 2 as well. But I wanted to give you just a little taste of what some of the information from our rural areas were on the pandemic. And so this would be just a couple short months back that they were surveyed. And I'll say that in most cases, the rural information has mirrored the overall state data that we had, with some exceptions. About 65% of our overall respondents said that that their business and operations had been negatively impacted by COVID, which is understandable. About 60%, about 61% of rural communities. So slightly less, slightly more insulated, I guess you could say, from some of the effects of the pandemic, but certainly not entirely. As you can see here, top 3 concerns with respect to the effects of the pandemic, not surprising. Revenue loss, cash flow, financial impact on operations or liquidity. But then look down the chain, which is supply chain disruption, 21%. Now, you'll say workforce availability, wow, that's low. It's not because it's not a critical and not actually one of their top. I think it's just because it has been an issue for some time. And this was to add a question specifically about our top 3 concerns. So workforce is still ranks right up there. One of the things that I don't know that I would say it's disturbing, but it's been consistent through all 3 of the surveys, is, has your organization done any of the following? Our rural communities are certainly doing things to respond, but the numbers aren't quite as high as what they were statewide. So implementing new systems and technology, over a quarter have been doing that. Started to deliver products and services, again, over a quarter doing that. Started offering new products and services, about 21%. The thing that maybe is I wish I would like to see a little higher down there on posting on Shop Iowa, those types of things. And Carla, I apologize. You're gonna my Zoom button is right over some of this data, so I'm having to jump over to my cheat sheet here. So yeah, so the news is that I think we can be a little more proactive. And so in our rural communities, certainly we're focused on putting out the fires related to COVID, but are they being super strategic in preparing for the future? Maybe they're not completely out of the COVID process and able to do that. But I think as economic developers, as community leaders, that's what we can do. And to keep that in front of them is the need to be proactive and start to think about, have you diversified, no matter even if they're a mainstream business, have they started looking at online operations or other ways? So that's something to keep in mind. Carl, any comments on this slide?
No.
Okay. So the next slide talks about how much time do you think will pass before your organization needs to resume, get back to those March 2020 levels. And you can see, this is going to take a while. Again, this is consistent with the rest of the state, but our rural businesses, it's going to take more than 6 months for them to get back. Businesses down, those businesses that said that they had been negatively impacted, 20%, their business had been dropped by about 20%. So it's going to take some time. So it's kind of like when I was be out counseling small business and you would see a bunch of cars in front of a restaurant and you would think that that restaurant was doing gangbusters business, but you talk to the owner and they're like, I'm upside down and things aren't as rosy as they seem. Just because we have been able to ditch our masks and get back to a semblance of normalcy, know that our businesses are not there. I was talking with Drew Conrad this morning, and you've probably seen this on television and in the papers as far as our restaurant industry. They're being hammered by not having available workers to come back. And so there's the huge challenge there. And that's also in our rural communities. We were talking about Bill's restaurant and Bill's barbecue place there in Independence, having to reduce number of days of the week that they're open. And I'm sure that there's restaurants and tourism related organizations in your communities that have had to reduce as well.
Hey, James.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you, I just wanted to quick respond to one of the chat questions.
Yeah.
The survey ran from February 23rd through March 24th of 2021. And then as we're going through this, James, I haven't really dug into the rural as a whole. How many respondents or what percentage of that 6450 were considered rural from those rural zip codes?
That's a great question.
I mean, as I think about it, and I look at
that.
10%, 10.5% don't believe their organization will return to its normal level of operations. That's a lot.
Yeah, and I apologize. I don't have the number percentage, and if Drew is on and he happens to have that number, please jump in and share. That'd be awesome. But I'll have that in the rural report that's going to come out.
Drew just said over 50% are rural respondents.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you. One thing to keep in mind up in the right-hand corner, in the next 6 months, will your organization be doing the following? Here is what we were in the rural areas, just slightly below, but very consistent with the rest of the state, except in the area of supply chain operations. Maybe this is an area that they are going to be proactive in, maybe from our manufacturing sector. Maybe they can take we can learn a lot from them, is that the need to be identifying new supply chains is about 4% higher in rural communities than it is in the rest of the state. Again, they may have had fewer options and been a little bit less connected with supply chain options to respond to pandemic challenges. Something to keep in mind as we move forward. And then how challenging has it been? Again, this isn't anything that's too that you probably didn't expect, but again, workforce availability, huge, extremely or very challenging, revenue loss, cash flow, and the like there. So it gives you an idea of just some of the impacts to rural communities, and we'll be putting together that rural report that should be out just actually within the next couple of days. Carla, can you visit with us a little bit about follow-up reports? That's a big thing that we've been doing here at the University Centers, providing follow-up reports to communities.
Sorry, I was typing and yeah, you need to have at least 50 businesses to have responded so that we can assure some sort of anonymity for those businesses in your area. So if you want to have a regional or county-wide report completed, or if you think your community may have had at least 50, really just send an email to Drew, and he will pull the numbers, let you know if we can create a report. And we're working with our colleagues in strategic marketing services to pull that data and then create those regional reports for you. And I know that in the past 2 surveys, we've had a lot of people or a lot of entities asking for those surveys. So if you've had a previous one done in that same jurisdiction, we can make some comparisons back to those previous reports as well. And I see Drew has put his email in the chat. So please reach out if you are interested in getting one of those reports for the respondents from your jurisdiction.
Very good. Mark, those are kind of the things that Carla and I wanted to touch on this morning, just to give you a quick taste of what's been going on with UNI's University Center from our work in the Business for Attention Expansion, the Industry 4.0, and then our business impact response. But we're happy to, if you've got additional questions, or we're happy to answer additional questions from the group.
And I'll just add, for those of you who might not be watching the chat, I did put a link to our EDA University Center webpage, where we are housing those survey summaries as they are released. So right now for survey 3, we have the executive summary that was completed for IEDA, and the nonprofit report, which we completed for Iowa nonprofits. And we'll be adding the rural report as soon as it's released.
Well, thank you, James and Carla. And we have about 10 minutes. Does anybody have questions? You can just unmute and ask directly to Carla and James. Well, seeing no questions, you must have been very thorough in your explanation of your programming. So once again, I'd like to thank everybody for being on the Zoominar today. And a reminder to everybody to be in Newton on June 22nd from 10 to 3 for our quarterly meeting. That will be our Zoominar. And then please, once again, pencil in August 18th through the 20th in Cedar Rapids for the IRDC Summit. Thanks again.
You bet. Thanks, Mark.
Good job.